Welcome to the Write, Publish, Market podcast. If you're an entrepreneur considering writing a book to serve your business, you're in the right place. Or maybe you've already decided. That's even better. I'm your host, Jodi Brandon, book publishing partner for entrepreneurs and 20-year veteran of the book publishing industry. On the Write, Publish, Market podcast, in addition to learning from me, you'll meet entrepreneurs just like you and hear about their experiences as we explore all facets of writing, publishing, and marketing a book that will help your business grow in ways you might not even have dreamed of yet. We are talking today with Jenn Zellers. Jenn and the Visibility Ecosystem team equip online service providers, digital product creators, coaches, and authors with everything they need to establish a sustainable marketing system that grows your business, generates sleaze-free sales, and establishes you as the thought leader through speaking and collaborations. So welcome. I'm happy to have you today, Jenn.
Yeah, I'm excited to be here and officially get to meet you.
I know. We were talking before we started recording that we have known each other, quote unquote, for a long time, but never actually spoke to each other face to face before today. So this is exciting on many levels. Jenn, give us like the quick and dirty, who you are, what you do, who you serve, all the good things.
Yeah. So my husband and I run Virtual Summit Search and Visibility Ecosystem. Virtual Summit Search is where we officially met at first, and then Visibility Ecosystem is what we are spinning off part of that into. So we work with online service providers, digital product creators, coaches, and authors, and we help them build a visibility ecosystem so they can have sustainable marketing systems without burning out and still grow their business.
Love it. Perfect. Burnout's a big deal, right? I mean, it's always been a big deal, but I feel like people are finally talking about it, like honestly and authentically. So yeah, sustainability that sounds like pretty good for all of us, right? All of us. So, okay, let's start with like, just what do you mean when you say sustainable marketing systems? Because I know that's going to mean something different to everybody.
Yeah. So our definition over at Visibility Ecosystem is a marketing strategy that allows you to take the speaking and collaboration opportunities that you have, so getting in front of other people's audiences, and turn those into other marketing assets as well. So some people may use that as their only marketing. Other people are going to take those opportunities, turn them into reels and posts for social media and emails and things like that. So that way you're not creating everything from scratch, and that helps make it a lot more sustainable.
Absolutely. Well, and then you also have time to be doing the things that focusing on whatever your zone of genius is, or,
Exactly.
maybe writing a book, for example. You'll have time to do that because you're taking some of that other stuff off your plate. So I love that. That's fantastic. I feel like we're not talking about some of that stuff enough on the overall online business world. You know what I mean? You see people who are doing all of these things. You're like, oh my gosh, how do they have time to do all that? And nobody's talking about repurposing or some of these other things that they're doing, to make the rest of us feel bad.
Yeah. And recycling without just regurgitating.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, and I mean, I think all of that, writing a book ties into that so nicely, just because you're writing a book. I mean, if you're listening to this podcast, you're not just a random author, you're a business owner writing a book, probably. So you want to be able to use all of those other opportunities, the collaborations and the speaking and all of those things that you mentioned before. So,
yeah.
All right. So let's talk about it. Like, how do we do it?
Yeah. So we always start off our clients with a podcast tour. That is the most proactive way that you can get started with speaking. So doing something like I'm doing here with Jodi, where you go and you appear on somebody else's podcast. As a business owner, you may have already done that, and you may just not have gotten the results that you wanted. So we go and we equip them with an actual strategy, with a sleaze-free sales strategy, so they can make sales. And especially if you're selling a book, then you can go and talk about the book throughout it without being sleazy and slimy about it. So you can feel good about it. And then as you build that podcast tour, you start getting on virtual summits, you start getting invited to other things. Maybe you go speak in some group programs because as an author, you are perceived as even more of an expert.
You're an expert.
And so there's all sorts of different ways that you can use those speaking and collaboration opportunities to build into that visibility ecosystem.
I love that. Yeah. Well, it's all of it working together too. And especially with the kind of book that my audience is writing, that's how it's supposed to be. Yep. You know what I mean? Your book shouldn't be something completely separate from your business. If you want to write a book like that, absolutely, that's fantastic. But to work it into your business ecosystem, that's kind of the name of the game for my people. So that makes perfect sense. So is recycling and repurposing really the name of the game when it comes to, book snippets and all that kind of stuff? Or yeah.
It can be. So there's a lot of different ways you can approach it. With authors, it's really fun because you may take a particular chapter of your book and put that on tour for a month or two, and then you may change over to another topic. And so that way you're not getting bored. You're not recycling the exact same interview questions every single time.
I love that.
Because especially when you're writing a book and you go on a book tour, it feels like you're getting the exact same questions over and over and over. And even if your audience is new to you and they're not getting bored with it, you're getting bored. So it's really easy to burn out on that aspect. So we try to make sure that you're getting new questions and you have at least one unique question from each interview, so that even if that's the only thing that you particularly are excited to share, you have something that you're excited to share.
You have something to pull from. Yes, I love that. Oh, that's really, really smart. I don't see a lot of people doing that. That's very good.
Usually with PR agencies, you're just getting pitched
absolutely.
They use the exact same pitch every single time.
Yeah. Okay. I love that. I get a lot of comments on my podcast. So if you have people to send my way, Jenn, please do. The book journey episodes that we do, where you're talking about the book, but it's more about, why did you write a book for your business? Like versus like creating a course or something like that. And we run through like a standard list of questions. What parts did you like? What parts didn't you like? How are you using it in your business? So it's like a little bit of a spin on talking about the book. I mean, obviously, I love talking to people about that stuff, but people really seem to like those episodes and are drawn to those episodes. Yeah. And I think that's why, because it's a little bit different.
Yeah. And it gives you a behind the scenes look. So it's something that, you're not getting everywhere else, but it can also get tweaked a bit to that audience and what specific areas of that behind the scenes they're interested in. So if it's a podcast targeting moms, they may be more interested in, okay, how did you manage to write a book and run a business and have 3 kids under 10?
Yeah. Please tell me. Yes.
Versus if you're talking to college kids, they may be more interested in, okay, how did you get from college to writing a book and running a business? So it gives you a lot of different areas that you can delve into.
Yeah. Well, and that strategy piece is so important, right? Because, and I think I was just talking to someone the other day, a book marketing expert, and we were talking about how you've got to start early. You've got to start early. You've got to start early, but you're already so overwhelmed when you're writing a book. Because it's just, you're probably doing it for the first time. It's this huge undertaking and you're putting a lot of pressure on it. You're taking time away from income producing activity in your business. And it's just then to add like one more thing on top of it sometimes feels like too much. So I always like to have people on who can help people with, take some of it off their plate, right? And, again, stay in your own zone of genius. So.
And actually going on a podcast tour can help with writing a book, because a lot of the time I've found if you have a good host, they're going to ask questions that you didn't think about and you didn't even realize your audience might be asking. And now you may have a new chapter or at least a new section of your book.
Yeah. New text for your book. Yeah. Oh, that's a great point. Yes. Yeah. I think it all does come down to strategy, right? If you can get that strategy piece right, everything kind of falls into place, but it's an often forgotten until so far late in the process piece of the puzzle. Yeah.
Especially if you don't know what the strategy should be. If you've never done this before and you're just starting from scratch, it can be overwhelming on top of everything else that's overwhelming with writing a book. So
absolutely. Yeah. Well, yeah, because I mean, the good thing and the bad thing, right, is that your imagination is your only limitation. So, I find that there are people that have, way too many ideas and need help distilling them down. Or then there's people who are just like, I don't even know. My mind is frozen because of all these possibilities. So yeah, having somebody who can kind of help you, figure out where and how to focus is a good thing. I wanted to make sure to ask you about introverted authors, because that's a lot of people then have trouble figuring out what should they do? Is it just about speaking? How can I be a speaker if I'm introverted? All of that. So do you have any tips for people?
Yes.
People there?
Absolutely. So honestly, introverts are often some of the best speakers because they tune in so much with their audience. They tend to be more connected with the emotional side of things. And as an extrovert, I can be too. But because I'm looking at the big picture, the big audience in the room, I sometimes am not quite as tuned in. And so for those introverts who are like that, that can be an opportunity to maybe focus on speaking in group programs or something like that, where you have a smaller audience that you can get really connected with without getting as overwhelmed by speaking in front of a really big group.
That's great advice. And I mean, and I'm sure that there are people breathing a sigh of relief too, right? Because there's lots and lots of business owners who are introverted and think that they're going to lose out on opportunities to, talk about the book, expand, all of the things that come with speaking. And actually, you know what? Why don't we talk about that a little bit? I know that a lot of people are very familiar with the speaking side of things, but so many business owners writing books, it's because they want to extend or grow or start a speaking arm of their business. Let's just talk about that a little bit, some of the benefits of speaking that maybe people aren't thinking of.
Yeah. So that is definitely a big thing, especially if you are an introvert, you can start online. And then you can decide if you actually want to go and speak in person, because speaking really creates a genuine connection. I don't know about you, but when I listen to a podcast, I feel way more connected to the people. I feel like I am hearing them. They're becoming my friends, even if they have no idea who I am, which most of the time they don't.
Right.
But your listeners are going to feel that. So when you're going on podcasts, when you're showing up at a virtual summit, then you're able to make those connections and they want to learn from you. And a book is a great next step because it's low cost, low barrier of entry, but it can take them up that customer journey to end up working with you in the future. And even if they don't, they're now in your world. They now trust you as an expert, and they're probably going to refer other people to you as well. And it can just build from there. And you can decide how far you want to go with speaking. If you want to go and do in-person speaking, or if you want to stick with online, you can do it based on your preferences, your capacity, your travel availability, and all sorts of other things.
Right. Love that. Hey, business owner, if you've listened to this podcast for a while now, you know how important I think a writing routine is. Preferably one that's in place before you begin that book writing, though it's never too late. So if you'd like some guidance in developing one, I've created the Ready, Set, Write Challenge for you to help you figure out where, when, and how you're the most productive writer. That's going to make your book writing so much more efficient. Check out jodibrandoneditorial.com/ready, set, write. Now back to the show. Yeah, I love that. I love that. Do you see more people using that, like creating, a signature presentation around their book? Or how do you see people using the book in conjunction with speaking?
There's a lot of different ways you can do it. So you could create a presentation where you touch just a little bit on different chapters of the book. You could create a presentation that is focused just on maybe the first chapter or the second chapter or something, give people a taste, and then refer them on. So it's just about creating a gap that your book fills or your services fill. And sometimes that's easier said than done.
Yeah.
But it creates this huge opportunity, especially because with a book to back you up, you have so many different things that you can play with and levers that you can pull to create different presentations for different audiences, different settings, different lengths. Because you may have a 15-minute presentation. You say, okay, I'm going to dive into chapter 1. We're not going further beyond that. If you want to go further, check out my book. You might have a 60-minute presentation where you say, okay, I can get into chapters 1 through 4, chapters 5 through 8, go read the book. So it just opens up a lot of possibilities.
I love that idea too, about expanding and contracting the presentation.
We call it the presentation accordion.
Love it. I love that. Yeah. Oh yeah. That makes perfect sense. I love that. I've never really thought about it like that. I always think like, I have the signature presentation. It's usually it's about 30 to 45 minutes, but I never really thought about doing something formally like
expand
that.
It and you contract it. And so we're working on a tool so you can actually input your speaking points and tell the tool, okay, I have 15 minutes or I have 60 minutes, and it'll expand or contract based on how much time you have.
Oh my gosh, that's brilliant. That's brilliant. I love that. When will that be ready? That sounds pretty exciting.
Our developers are working on it, so we'll see.
Good for you. That's fantastic. Yeah, that's a really clever, like a good twist on way to look at things versus, because I think sometimes people are like, oh, I only have 30 minutes, or like, oh, they're only giving me like this amount of time. And then like, what am I going to do? How am I going to like distill a 60-minute thing down to a 15-minute thing, or whatever the case may be? That's super smart. I love that.
I had to do it with an 8-minute presentation last fall.
Wow.
So you can do it. I promise.
Yeah. Well, and it's nice to have somebody telling you what to cut too. Same with writing a book. Clients tell me all the time, they're like, but I worked so hard on this chapter. Like,
it's all important. I know it is.
Yeah. And it is, but maybe it's just not for this particular book or for this particular chapter or whatever the case may be. That's very funny.
And when you think about it as like, okay, I only have this much time, but I have this entire book that they can dive into, you don't feel like you're shortchanging them. You're just giving them that taste test.
Yeah. Like overview highlights and then, send them to the book for more. I love that, which is, that's what we should be doing anyway, anytime we're talking, whether it's a presentation, so, social media, email, all the things, get people to the book. Okay. So let's say we don't have the book yet. We're working on the book. What should we be doing? Like, strategy wise, we've talked about, but like, any other like tangible tips of what people should be doing while they're putting together, whether it's a book or a course or whatever, some other kind of massive, big undertaking in business? What should we be doing to prepare ourselves, for that back end, like once it's out there?
Yeah. So I love sending my clients out on a podcast tour before they've released it, because a lot of the time it's usually a 3 to 6 month lead up. If you're recording a podcast like we're recording right now, but it's not going to get aired for a few months. And so you have to keep that in mind when you're getting ready for this. So if you're going to be going and releasing your podcast in October, you want to start pitching those podcasts at least by May, because you may not get on the schedule until June or July. And then you're going to have a few months potentially. And you can often ask the host like, hey, I have a book launching at this time. Will it fit in your content calendar? They may say yes, they may say no.
Yeah.
That just means you change your call to action. So start pitching 3 to 6 months ahead at least.
Okay.
And if you start pitching that far ahead, even if they're airing before the book launches, you're building a wait list. That's always what I recommend for my clients is have a wait list, whether you're publishing with an actual publishing house or you're self-publishing, create your own wait list, because it's going to build that audience. And then as soon as that book launches, you've got a built-in buyer ready list.
Okay. Is that what you mean by change the call to action? Like go buy the book versus get on the wait list? Okay.
Yep. And so you can even ask the host, hey, if they say, I think it'll probably air around this time, you can say, hey, can we record 2 different calls to action at the end of the episode? And then when you decide what date it is, use this one or that one based on which date. And so that way you're not left up a creek.
Yeah, that's great. Well, and honestly, like as a podcast host, I wouldn't have someone on the podcast and then be like, no, I don't want to help you. Like at that point, like what's the, so of course you're going to say yes to that. Okay. That's a great, changing the call to action is something that's super smart, especially when, because sometimes you just don't know some, editorial calendars and all that.
Yeah. And some hosts may even have access to dynamic content insertion. So they may even be willing to switch that out and kind of overwrite the waitlist call to action and put in the live one. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. A good podcast editor is a podcast host best friend. Okay. That's real. That's, oh my gosh, such good information. I feel like I have so many questions. I don't even know what to ask. Like I'm one of those that has all the questions versus none of the questions. Okay. So like, what's the best way to work with someone like you?
Yeah. So for us in particular, we are forming an agency right now for retainer clients where we will do like all the actual heavy lifting, but we are also launching a group program. So
neat. Okay.
For those who aren't quite ready for that level, you'll be able to get all of our frameworks and the tools like that presentation accordion tool when it comes out. And so that way you've got that starting point. So you can start building it yourself. And then eventually, if you want to just take it off your plate, you can. But it just depends on the different agencies that you may look at. You may have a PR agency where they're just pitching you to podcasts, which is great. But where we differentiate that is that my husband is my business partner and he's also a speaking coach. So like he's coached competitive award-winning public speakers. And so he actually does the public speaking training. We've got group presentation practice calls. We've got interview practice calls and things like that.
Okay.
So rather than just being like, hey, here's a podcast, show up, you actually go in feeling prepared. You've gotten to practice. You know that you're ready and you have your questions for the host to ask.
Yeah.
And your leads-free sales strategy is in place. So you know how to set up those sales without feeling gross about it.
Love that.
So you just got to know what you're looking for out of the agency that you're hiring so you can make the best fit choice.
Right. Love that. And at what point do you recommend people start looking to work with some kind of agency? I mean, obviously before the book,
comes out. But I mean, is it possible to do it after also? Or
it is. Yeah. It just wouldn't be for a launch podcast tour or anything like that. It would just be more for ongoing, which is the other great thing about podcasts is that they have such a long tail. People are finding them even years after the podcast aired.
Yeah. It's amazing. Yeah. Podcasting is amazing. I didn't know a lot about it before I started. I jumped in before I knew a ton. It's an amazing industry. It really is. Yeah. Okay.
So
but even easier before the book, right?
I wouldn't say easier. It can be more impactful for your launch if you do that in your sales and everything. But if you're launching and you're having a call to action for the waitlist, you just change that URL to redirect to the actual book page. And so that way you can still keep using those podcasts that aired before, but you can still go and keep adding them on later. And you can create like a Spotify playlist or something like that to gather up all of the episodes. So even if it's
that's a great tip. That's a great tip, Jenn. Like maybe you're where I learned that from, actually. I bet you are. I would have to go back and look at where I learned it from, but I think so. To create, as a guest, not a podcast host, but as a guest, like a playlist of your and if you're doing that's even more of a reason to do what you're saying, like to tweak things a little bit for each one, because if you have a playlist and everyone's just listening to the same exact thing over and over and over again, not as compelling.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. Oh my gosh. Such good information here. Okay. Before I let you go, I've got to ask for a reading recommendation. I asked for a reading recommendation because everybody who listens to this podcast loves books and we always want more, for our TBR pile.
Let's see. I'm trying to think which ones. I've kind of been on a reading fast lately because I'm trying not to consume too much content as I am. But
or an old favorite.
Old favorites are always dragon books. So
that's all right. We'll take anything. Anything goes.
I know StoryBrand's always a good one to go to.
That's a great one. Yep.
Like that's
StoryBrand is a good one and a good like reread. Like, so that's an evergreen recommendation. I call it. That's a good one. Okay.
That would probably be my current nonfiction. I need to go back to that anyway. So
that's on I just talked to someone the other day and they were like, oh, every January I reread like these 5 books. And I was like, oh, that's a great idea. Like start the new year, like get the juice, creative juices flowing. So that's fantastic.
12-week year. That's the one I read most recently.
Oh, that's a good one too.
I had to reread it because we decided to start implementing that this year. So that's actually my current one.
Okay. That's a good one. I haven't read that in a long time.
I know. It had been a long time.
Yeah. But that's one of those when I reread it every however long time passes by, I'm always like, why do I not do this every single year? Yeah, that's a good one. Okay. All right. We're going to list all the ways to connect with you in the show notes, but what's the best, fastest way for someone to connect with you that listens to this episode and wants to, Jenn?
Just head on over to visibilityecosystem.com. And by the time this episode comes out, we'll have our free audio training to introduce you to the visibility ecosystem method. If you go to visibilityecosystem.com/audio.
Awesome. Fantastic. Thank you so much for this. I feel like I can't wait to re-listen and take a bunch of notes for myself. That's always a good sign, I think. So thank you so much, Jenn.
Yeah. Thank you so much for having me, Jodi.
Thanks for listening to today's episode of the Write, Publish, Market podcast. I know just how busy your schedule is as a business owner, so I'm grateful you've taken some time out of yours to journey into the world of book publishing with me today. If you are looking for even more book writing, marketing, and publishing information and support, check out my mentorship membership, the Author Entrepreneurs Lab, where each month we take a deep dive into one element of the book world with education, a Q&A session with me, your book publishing expert, resources, co-writing times, and so much more. You can learn more at the link in the show notes. I hope to see you inside the lab.